Welcome back to Combat Mission Black Sea, Dance of the Javelins, Part 2. If you never saw the first game, it is probably worth checking out to get some context for this game. You can find a link in the video description. In my first game on this map against Rec 187, I played from the blue side. In this game, I played from the red side against Shipwrecked, who also has a Combat Mission YouTube channel, and is releasing a video of the game at the same time as this is released. This is a mirror of the first game and has the same settings. US Mechanized forces only, so no Abrams. No pre-planned artillery set to immediate timing, but pre-planned at the 5, 10, or 15 minute mark is fine, and immediate smoke is fine as well. We also added a no aircraft other than observation drones rule. The map is mostly flat, split up with some areas of thick trees and brush. And although it looks like there should be long sight lines from the overhead view, it is surprisingly difficult to make spots on this map. There are 5 objectives, 1 major objective to the west on my right side, 3 minor objectives around some houses in the middle of the map, and a minor objective on my center left side of the map. On the east side is a small hill that does provide the best long-range sight lines in the game, which was a key piece of terrain in my first game with Requin. My original idea was to take a strong position on the far side of the middle objectives right at the start of the game. The red side has a slightly better approach to this section of woods, so if I controlled the rightmost center objective, this section of woods, and these sections of woods, then I would be in a very strong position to control all 3 middle objectives. But I scrapped this plan because I decided I did not need to totally abandon the east side minor objective. So my final plan was to send a small force to the major objective, where the force would be just large enough to contest it, but probably not large enough to control it. I would send a small blocking force to these woods to keep Shipwrecked from having a base of fire on the middle objectives from 2 sides, and then the bulk of my force was going to the east. This significant force would be tasked to take the minor objective here, but more importantly, to destroy the outnumbered blue forces on this side of the map, and then roll up from the flanks any blue forces in the middle. To accomplish this, I took a force very similar to what I used in the first game, which was a US Mechanized Bradley company with 9 Bradleys and some support units. In the first game I had a total of 15 Javelins, but they had a lot of difficulty getting line of sight to Requin's Bradleys, so I decided to add a section of 155mm artillery and a forward observer in order to drop guided rounds onto Bradleys that will be hard to spot with my infantry teams. To make space for this, I dropped the 6 add-on Javelin teams, 1 crack sniper team, and 1 of the orphan HQ teams that will serve as ad hoc Javelin teams, the 120mm mortars and the Stinger team, and I dropped a squad from 3rd Platoon. Always fun to hit go on turn 1 and see what happens. On my right towards the major objective, 1st Platoon's Bradley stays behind the small hill as it sprints to the cover of the trees at the major objective. The driver celebrates not getting blasted on turn 1 by doing a quick donut, before dropping off a fire team that will rush to the major objective. The Bradley then takes a Javelin team and a sniper team to the far right overlook position, where they all settle in, waiting for Shipwreck's blue forces to show up. Backing up to turn 1 in the middle, 2 of 2nd Platoon's Bradleys rush to the rightmost center objective, while Shipwreck is dropping a pre-planned smoke screen. As the forward Bradley unloads, a smoke round lands close enough to pin one of my green fire teams, while the other Bradley successfully unloads a Javelin team and another fire team. On turn 3, since I haven't seen any blue forces pushing toward the center minor objectives, I rush one of the Bradleys across the road so they cover behind a house in that critical center objective. Moving to the action on my left, but changing viewing orientation since most of the action will be in this section of the map, the 3rd Platoon Bradley with the APS gets to the reverse slope on this important far east hill and unloads a fire team, a sniper, and a javelin team. They push to the crest where they will start crawling forward. My drone has visibility on this side of the map, and since I only see blue forces in this cluster of houses, I push a Bradley forward to drop a fire team in this section of trees, and then race across the open ground to occupy the eastern minor objective. Here's the view at the end of turn 3. I fully control 3 of the minor objectives, and at the major objective, I am in a good position that will be tough to keep me from contesting it. I also have a small force on the eastern hill that will be a serious threat to any blue forces on this side of the map. I have already called in a precision strike with a 155mm Excalibur, and at the start of turn 5, that lands, taking out the blue Bradley. I immediately target another Bradley with a precision strike, but Shipwrecked starts adjusting his Bradleys every turn. This is also a problem for my Javelin gunners, who can't get a lock in time, and the second volley of a 155mm Excalibur explodes uselessly into the road. Meanwhile, Shipwrecked has been pushing his infantry forward, and I have been trying to snipe them with this Bradley. My first attempt targets the wrong house. On my second attempt, the blue infantry relocates just seconds before the autocannon arrives. And on my third attempt, Shipwrecked's Bradley is waiting. My Bradley loses its tow launchers, and since this is one of my green crewed Bradleys, they go into panic mode and do a couple of laps behind the house. Fortunately, the multispectral smoke and the house protects them, and the Bradley is not destroyed. Moving to the middle of the map, my Bradley that occupied the middle objective keeps popping from behind the cover of a house, blindly fires at suspected blue infantry locations, and retreats. Meanwhile, Shipwrecked unleashes a heavy 81mm mortar barrage, but I only have a few units inside the target area, and those are in houses, so I don't suffer any casualties. I know Shipwrecked's infantry or Bradley is trying to lock on because I keep getting laser warnings, but I only expose the Bradley for 15 seconds at a time, so the Bradley lives. However, my Bradley is forced into hiding in a smaller and smaller box, as Shipwrecked keeps pressing his infantry into better positions.
Sarge, we spotted enemy vehicles.
On turn 10, we get our first Javelin launch, which is intercepted by Shipwrecked's ABS. Back on the eastern side of the map, I gave up on the precision-guided 155 and called in a linear strike on this beautiful arrangement of blue infantry. But I also suffer my first casualty from some blue small arms fire. While in the middle, I relocate one fire team to a different house, and Shipwrecked is advancing multiple infantry teams among the houses and hedgerows. As turn 10 ends, Shipwrecked's infantry is right on the edge of the center minor objective. Here's an overhead view of the tactical situation at the end of turn 10. I have infantry in the major objective in a strong overwatch position. I haven't seen any blue troops cross this wood line. I don't feel like I have a force or the terrain available to completely control this objective when Shipwrecked decides to move here, so I'm content just to contest it. In the east, I currently occupy the eastern minor objective with good flank protection on both sides, and a heavy 155mm barrage will fall on this line here within a couple of minutes. This position feels very secure at this time. In the center, this is where it looks like the game will be decided. Currently, I only have 2 Bradleys and 2 fire teams in the center objective. I do have some flank support, but the sight lines are not great into those objective areas. Shipwrecked also only has 2 Bradleys over here, but he has a significant infantry force that will certainly have Javelins and AT-4s. The plan at this point is to reinforce the center objective with a 3rd Bradley and another fire team, and then hold at all costs with those troops until the 155 can finish its mission in the east and be adjusted to the center. I still have 117 unguided 155mm shells remaining. Worst case is that entire area is completely flattened. So I just need to hold his advance for a few minutes. And then turn 11 ends with a Javelin hitting my Bradley. But what did that message say? Hit reactive armor. I'm truly baffled by this. I've never seen ERA prevent a Javelin kill. My Bradley does take some significant subsystem damage, but turn 12 starts and the Bradley exacts revenge on the blue Javelin gunner. And then for some reason does a 180 and backs behind a building. At the same time, Shipwrecked pushes one of his infantry teams forward and into an exchange versus 3 of my fire teams, which are all in cover in buildings. As expected, the blue fire team loses that exchange. Back at the far eastern side of the map, another 155mm spotting round lands, and Shipwrecked orders one of his teams to run away.
Fire for effect, over.
That team escapes the destruction that starts on the next round, but the rest of his forces here do not. I always like watching artillery barrages, so I'm going to let this one play out at fast speed. Needless to say, Shipwreck's right flank is completely annihilated by this barrage. But it definitely isn't all one-sided. While my artillery is falling, a Shipwrecked Bradley here is causing just as much pain to my infantry in these 2 houses. Both of my infantry teams are reduced to 1 panicked soldier. However, the problem with pushing vehicles forward against US troops is that if you don't kill or suppress all of the infantry that have line of sight, you have a good chance of taking a Javelin to the face. And my infantry finally get a Javelin. Back in the middle, Shipwreck decides he is tired of my Bradley hiding behind this house and removes it from the map. Fortunately, that backfires on Shipwreck because my Bradley goes into extreme spotting mode, and spotted infantry are no match for an angry Bradley. I'm going to show the next 4 turns from this view because it is extremely chaotic and deadly. And it starts with a random 81mm mortar hitting the top deck of one of my Bradleys on the move. The mortar causes some subsystem damage, but the Bradley is still fully operational. And that Bradley and my other 2 Bradleys in this area duel some blue infantry in this center area and come out on top. At the same time, another Shipwrecked heavy mortar barrage starts falling. It is again falling in an area where I don't have troops exposed and I suffer no casualties. While that is happening in the center, my Bradley that had been hiding patiently behind the eastern hill begins a flanking move using the concealment of this tree line. This is the area where Shipwreck's infantry was decimated by my 155mm a couple turns earlier. And so my Bradley is able to arrive behind Shipwreck's troops on the far east flank. After some autocannon to the rear and side, the blue Bradley is destroyed by a tow missile. Meanwhile, the chaos and destruction in the center continues. I decided it was time for a full Bradley press, so these 3 Bradleys here and these 3 Bradleys here move from cover to an open firing position. And the 7 Bradleys encircling his position becomes overwhelming, and basically his entire infantry force will soon be wiped out. However, once again this fight is not completely one-sided. Shipwrecked did get a Javelin launch and kill, and this blue Bradley activates beast mode. One of my Javelin teams here locks on and fires, but this beast mode Bradley doesn't even notice and responds by killing half of my Javelin team. Next turn, despite being outnumbered 3-1, this beast mode Bradley gets a spot and takes out one of my Bradleys. And on the next turn, this Bradley pushes forward looking for more prey, but my Javelin team, recovered from the casualty, locks on and fires again. Turret penetration, but no kill. Seeing that the beast mode Bradley is still functioning, my Javelin team reloads and fires again. Yet the Bradley still lives. That Bradley survived 3 Javelin hits. I've never seen anything like that before. Finally, on the next turn, one of my Bradleys puts enough autocannon into that blue Bradley to move it to the knocked out category. At this point, I asked Shipwrecked if he wanted to ceasefire. He declined. The next few turns were mostly anticlimactic, but there were a few interesting moments. I moved my Bradley on the far east flank here to try to get line of sight on Shipwreck's APS Bradley here. One of my Javelin teams targets it again, but as expected, the Javelin is defeated by APS. My Bradley does finally get the first spot and launches 2 tows. The first is defeated by APS. The second flies away wildly because his Bradley destroys all the targeting and weapons on my Bradley. My Javelin gunners fire at it again, and, as expected, the Javelin is defeated by APS. But just after the Javelin hits, a volley of Excalibur lands, which does in fact destroy that Bradley. Shipwrecked did move a team to the major objective. They take a few casualties from my Overwatch, but I'm not able to push them out. And the last play of the game is another heavy mortar barrage from Shipwrecked that finally does land right on top of some of my infantry. As I said before, it's always fun to watch artillery barrages, even if they cause 10 casualties to my troops. And that was the end of the game. I suffered 28 casualties and only had 1 knocked out Bradley. That number is a little misleading since 5 of my other 8 Bradleys had moderate to heavy system damage. Shipwreck lost 75 of his 99 men. It was not a good day for his infantry. They were just overpowered by my Bradleys and my 155mm artillery. Here's the view of the final map. After the game, Shipwreck said that he played too cautious at the start of the game, which I agree with. I was able to move uncontested to really good positions across the entire map by the end of turn 3, and at that point, Shipwrecked had to attack me, which is always going to be tough in a meeting engagement where we have equal forces. So big thanks to Shipwrecked for the extremely entertaining game, both with the action in the game and the quick turnaround of the files. Please check out his video of the game on his YouTube channel, and until the next time, happy gaming.